Hello, this is Fiona Cuthbertson coming for the pod to record another episode of Off the Cuff. This week, we're lucky enough to have Simon Copeland. Simon has been designing elegantly glamorous clothes for a loyal and discerning list of private clients for over 25 years. Specialising in the couture end of the market, he works closely with his clients to ensure that the pieces he makes translates into truly bespoke results. Welcome, Simon.
Hello.
So, firstly, can you tell us a bit about your career and how you ended up in fashion?
Well, Fiona, it was always going to happen, I'm afraid. I knew from a very early age that was the path I wanted to go into, but I kept it quite hidden at school because you didn't really talk about going into making dresses and things like that as an army child. But I knew right from the word go. And I can remember my parents coming to a parents' evening and they went through all of the subjects and then they came to my art teacher, who I absolutely loved. And she said, "I'm really sorry to say, but Simon's really not doing very well. He's just not in there, you know? He hasn't grasped his subject yet. We're still trying to find it." And my mother turned around and said, "What on earth do you mean? Sisters don't leave their dolls around the house for 2 minutes because they'll find that he's made them a new dress out of tissue paper or loo paper or whatever." And the teacher, she was absolutely aghast. And I have to say that basically my mother outed me completely at the teacher's parents' meeting, because next time I went into the art class, there she was, crossed arms, and said, "Right, Simon, we have to have a chat." But it was the loveliest thing, because what she actually did was she said, "Right, we've got your O levels coming up. We need to tailor these to you. And then we need to look forward from that and look at your A levels." And from that moment on, the art department took me in a completely different direction and probably got me into art college. So I owe an awful lot to my art teachers at school.
And dressing your sister's dolls up in tissue paper.
Yes, they weren't very happy when I started experiment with cutting the doll's hair. But I have to say, the dresses were more successful. So it's probably a good thing I didn't take that route.
So what has been the highlight of your career?
Well, I suppose it was always my dream to have my own shop. And so when I did open my first shop in Battersea, that was a very big moment. And I'm very pleased to say that both my parents were able to be there and some of my school friends as well, which was really lovely. And obviously also college friends. And it was very much the highlight. But in some ways, I kind of hope I'm still got a few, up my sleeves. So
long way to go.
I'm still working up to it. Yes, maybe.
And what's been the hardest challenge you've had to overcome?
Well, I think like most people, the global pandemic a few years ago really leveled us all out, didn't it? That nothing was off limits, and it changed so much for so many of us. And for my business, overnight, it totally closed down. And I know I wasn't the only one in this boat. I know that there were many wedding suppliers, florists who literally the bottom fell out. It was a really quite scary time. But as with so many people also, with these things comes great opportunities to look further, maybe, than what you've been doing.
Absolutely. If you could be remembered for one piece of work, what would it be?
That would have to be when my eldest sister got married many years ago. I did my sister's dress there, which was a big compliment. But I have to say, the dress I did for my mother, it just incorporated so much of what I'm about. And she said from the very outset, "I want you to dress me as you see me." And so I threw everything at it. I mean, she wasn't wearing everything but the kitchen sink, but it had all the elements of cutting and draping and lots of little, inside her initials were embroidered. And that would be my one. That's the one I remember anyway.
I was going to ask you next, what inspires your designs?
Well, I'm very lucky to have got to travel quite a lot. At a very early age, I got to explore Italy, and I have to say, you can drop me anywhere in that country. And if I've got my sketchbook and a pencil, I will happily sit under a tree. I will sit on the road, on a curbside, and sketch away. And some of my most successful collections I have designed in Italy. My husband and I go back whenever we can, because if I don't get my fix of that country, I start to wither.
You mentioned collections there. Obviously, that indicates you've done a number of fashion shows in your time. Now, fashion has a reputation for being very cutthroat. Is it like that, or is it portrayed like that to increase the hype?
I don't see it as any more cutthroat than other businesses. I mean, ultimately, fashion is about money. It's about finance. But I do think there is an awful lot of hot air. When you're starting out, you believe everything, and you do believe all of the hype and all of that hot air. And that can be quite distracting. But if you take it for what it is, which is basically hot air, and you can distill it and just focus on what you need to do, I think it's the same as any, really.
So what did you think of the film The Devil Wears Prada?
I loved it. I loved it. My favorite story as a child was Cinderella. And it's the idea of taking that person from wearing rags and transforming them into a dream. That has been my thought process in so much of my work. It's that whole story, I suppose, of transformation. And so, of course, when in that film, when the heroine is formed, okay, so she does it reluctantly, but my goodness me, what a transformation.
Absolutely. And what role does storytelling play in your design process?
Oh, vital. Weddings, especially. When a bride comes to me, you ask all of the details of the wedding, but you want to know that story of, as a little girl, if she imagined getting married, and if she did, what is that to her? It's sometimes the most funny things that come up, but it's also the most wonderful way of creating something truly unique. One of the first brides who came to my shop in Battersea, she was this most beautiful French lady. They were having a wedding in London and then a wedding in the south of France. I did the outfit for the London wedding, which was very smart tailored for that bit. But then for the wedding in the south of France, we went full Duchess satin gown. And what I loved about that was that the photographer went up to the bride at the end of the wedding and said, I just haven't got the shot of you and your husband. So will you, in the morning, your wedding dress back on and come and meet me down on the beach? They went down to the beach and the photographer said, now I want the sea in the background. And the bride said, oh, okay, all right, that's fine. And take off your shoes and no jewelry, and the veil can go too. And said, okay, righto. She said, and go a bit further back, further back still. And this poor bride ended up in the surf in the sea with waves crashing around her husband lying next to her, and the photographer was so excited because he got the shot. And it's one of my favorite pictures of my brides, because the poor bride was literally screaming at the photographer, Simon is going to kill me. Simon's going to kill me when he sees what I've done to the dress. But you know what? We had the dress cleaned when she got back to London, and it was absolutely perfect.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. As well as weddings, obviously, as I said before, you do fashion shows. So what is it like doing a fashion show?
Intense. I have to say, I don't think you look forward to it. I think you see it as a necessary part of the process. Once the ball starts rolling, it's all consuming. It's very exciting. And I think what I really love about it is that that's when the team really comes together. So you have your hairdressers, your makeup artists, your seamstresses, everybody just piles on board and does what they can. The one thing I always say to them now is, please don't try and feed me, because they're always, can never eat. I'll have some water, but I just can't bear a cup of tea, and I love tea. You literally just focus on it all. So I'm constantly trying to be fed or watered, and I've had to
You just don't want that.
No, I don't want that. Let's all just get on with our job, and then we'll be good. And we always do. It's great fun.
And then have the champagne afterwards.
Yeah, maybe.
And obviously, with respect to fashion shows, would you find that you are associating with other designers as well at that time? And do you find any particularly hard or easy to work with?
There definitely have been some designers who are quite tricky. And those names are for the memoir.
But you can say the story without the name.
I don't know. I think there's an expectation of designers to be monsters. And I'm not actually sure it is the designers. I think it's more the people around them who are almost competing entities.
And believe the hot air.
And yeah, but I can tell you two of the designers who were always complete heroes of mine. And they say you should never meet your heroes. So one of the dresses I did for, it was actually my own Barbie, because by the point of the royal wedding, my parents had decided, okay, there's nothing for it. Simon needs to have his own Barbie. So I designed a replica of the gown that, as she was then, Lady Diana wore marrying Prince of Wales. So I remember it to this day. David Emmanuel agreed to meet with me. Imagine this, I got special leave out of school and I was allowed to come up to London, meet my father, and we met David Emmanuel and he got the little Barbie out of, she's still in her little shoebox, and he got it out of the shoebox and he went, oh my goodness. And he was such a gentleman. The other designer who I think is one of the best designers ever is Linka Chirac, who did the Duchess of York's wedding dress. I was very lucky to get to meet Linka and to get to know her and to go through her sketches and to see some of the toiles of the dress. Linka is the reason I wanted to go to the London College of Fashion, because she said, this college will be just right for you. And it absolutely was. It's funny how find your little niche. And I will always be grateful that I got to meet her and got real advice from her. And I think she designed the most stunning dress. I think it's probably one of the most successful royal wedding dresses ever. You talk about storytelling. Embroidered on that dress is so much of not just the history of the bride and groom, but also the history of this country.
Many people say don't meet your heroes, and the fact that actually, considering the reputation designers have, that they were so professional and so kind and gave you that help, that's really good.
Totally. And some others who didn't, but I'm not sure which way I would go. Maybe meet your heroes. I don't know. But anyway, I was very lucky.
Coming back to fashion shows, obviously things are advertised on social media a lot now. Has that meant that more influencers turn up to events expecting freebies or attention just because they happen to have followers on Instagram or something?
I'm not so sure if it's just influencers. I think everybody expects freebies these days. It seems to be this quid pro quo, of even just turning up. The worry I have for all of that stuff, and social media plays such an important part in all creative industries. It's such a visual medium for us all. But I do worry that it's more about clicks and likes than the journey. I get some of the work that my embroiderers do, and it takes hours and hours and hours, and you can see that in the finished results. It worries me that such beautiful pieces of what I think is art can be diluted to something quite so quick. I suppose that's in every sphere.
Yes, but it's people not actually understanding or appreciating the effort that goes into these things.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the fashion industry today?
When I had my first shop, I had so many more seamstresses and embroiderers and button makers. This is going to make me sound like old Father Time, but worry for me is that so many incredible disciplines are in danger of being lost. The exquisite needlework that you can find in a vintage shop. You'd think how long those things took to embroider, but somebody can replicate that, or a machine can replicate that in very quick time now.
And coming back to what we were talking about earlier regarding COVID, you said that there were changes of direction. You started working with textiles during that time. What inspired that particular move?
It was a bit of a joke, actually, because when COVID hit, obviously after my complete utter meltdown, once you got through that and you kind of think, so this is the reality, where do we look now? When they asked for help with PPE and stuff like that, I thought, well, we've got all the machines. Instead of them just sitting idle, why not have them going? I went on this incredible journey. My seamstress is the one who always turned the machines on and stuff like that. I didn't even have a clue how to turn a machine on. Husband said to me, well, you must have seen her turn it on before. Come on. Anyway, obviously, thank goodness for Google and YouTube. But I ended up doing the scrubs for the NHS, and that led on to do the surgical gowns for, I think it was Charing Cross Hospital. And that in itself, that took completely out of my comfort zone of where I've been very happily bimbling away for years. And it also opened up this whole new sphere of exploring not just textures and mediums, but also processes. And it was almost like opening an Aladdin's cave of creativity. That's the only way I could describe it. Obviously it was a terrible time and so many people lost so much. And sadly, we lost a few clients over that time. But out of that darkness did come the opportunity to rethink and then explore. And I do think that's one of life's lessons, I would say, probably. Never give up exploring and learning.
And when you're designing new textile designs, what inspires you? What do you look to create your pieces?
Oh, it comes from just I could be looking at milk in a cup of tea and see something and think, oh, okay. But things like spiders' webs or shadows, a bit like my dress designing, architecture, landscapes has always played a big part. But I was recently in Iceland and I can remember being utterly fascinated by the pine cones. And I have no idea why I was walking through this forest and the pine cones were just so I came back to the hotel with bags of pine cones. I was asked, what on earth are you going to do with this? I said, I really don't know. I really don't know. But you just know there's a nugget of something there, and it's really fun to explore. It may not come to anything, but it goes in the sketchbook and then can be referred to again later.
Exactly. You could come back to it in 20 years' time.
Well, yeah, I could. I was talking to somebody I hadn't seen for quite a few years, and she said, "Oh, I thought you'd retired." I said to her, I don't actually think dress designers get to retire. I think we literally keep going until we literally fall off the cutting table. If things are still good in 20 years' time, I will go back to that sketchbook.
Obviously, you need new people coming into the industry. So how are you encouraging young people to come into the creative industry?
I do believe in nurturing new talent and also just like I was advising on finding your niche. And I have been mentoring a few youngsters, although I have to say the generation of designers coming through now are extraordinary. I sit there and I think, who's being mentored here? I mean, I come away with that with so much more than I went in with. And I often feel that, oh gosh, I really don't know if I've done my role here very well because they're teaching me more than I'm teaching them. But I do think important to keep that train going.
So what advice would you give anyone looking to become a fashion designer?
As an industry, it requires a lot of your energy. It's not 9 to 5. It takes up months of your life, years sometimes, and you're literally going on to the next thing all the time. So I think if that's what you want to do, I think you have to be tenacious, really focused on what you want to achieve, have your goal in sight, because of all of the hot air and all of the hype, you can drift off that path, but you need to keep on that path and keep that goal focused. But I would also say that you should never take your creativity for granted. I think you have to, at all costs, protect it. I once worked with an amazing designer called Susan Llewellyn, who sad is no longer with us, but she left an enormous legacy of nurturing young talent. And she always said to me, your creativity is the one thing that when things are going well, you'll fly high with it. When things are not going well, it will save you. And she was absolutely right. It's literally where you go. It's almost like your oxygen.
And finally, do you feel positive about the future?
I do actually, bizarrely. I hope I haven't come across as all doom and gloom in this, but
Not at all.
I do think, if nothing else, the last few years have thrown all of the rules out of the window. And although it's been quite a scary place, in the last 18 months, I've met some extraordinarily amazing new people and gone to new places, and we've thrown up wonderful new projects that we're going to be working on. But one of the best bits of this is my husband and I have just been made great uncles. So there's a whole new generation for me to, well, completely spoil, but also to see that everything goes on. The cycle goes on. And who knows, his father's a very good footballer, so maybe he'll go into football. But, I'm hoping that maybe there'll be a creative streak. If he's anything like his mother, there will be a creative streak there to nurture.
Brilliant. Well, Simon, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. It's been most interesting to hear about your journey and a bit about the all-encompassing nature of fashion and its importance in the world and the creative side of life. And thank you to the listeners who hopefully enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it. If you have any questions regarding the podcast today, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. If you feel you need something to tide you over to the next podcast, please buy my book Party Games on Amazon. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Have a good week, one and all.